The last stand the station groaned like a dying beast. Metal twisted against metal somewhere in the lower decks. The lights flickered, died, then came back weaker than before. Commander Drake stood on the bridge and watched his world end. 50,000 souls, that was all that remained of humanity. 50,000 people crammed into a station that was falling apart, orbiting a star that had maybe 5 years left before it collapsed into itself. Outside the cracked viewports, the collective's fleet waited like wolves around a wounded deer. "Sir, they're hailing us again." Lieutenant Ross looked up from her console. She was young, maybe too young to remember Earth, too young to have seen the war begin. Drake nodded. "Put them through." The screen flickered. The collective didn't have a face. They were many species now, all absorbed into one mind. The voice that came through the speakers was flat and emotionless. "Commander Drake, this is your final opportunity. Surrender. Your species will be integrated. Your knowledge will be preserved. Your bodies will serve the greater purpose." Drake was quiet for a moment. Around the bridge, his crew waited. They had heard this message a dozen times before. Every time, Drake had said no. "My answer hasn't changed," Drake said simply. "Your empire has fallen." The Velner Empire lasted 10,000 years. They surrendered. The Cross Dynasty lasted 15,000 years. They are now part of us. The Tholian Federation. "I know the history," Drake interrupted. "Every empire falls. You've told us this many times. Then, why do you resist? You cannot win. Your station is damaged beyond repair. Your weapons are depleted. Your people are starving. We offer you survival." Drake looked around the bridge. Ross met his eyes and nodded. At the engineering station, old Turner was patching a power conduit with tape and wire. The man had to be 70 years old, but his hands were steady. "You're right," Drake said. "We can't win. Our empire fell 2 years ago when you destroyed Earth. Everything we built is gone. Our home is ash. Our colonies are silent." The collective waited. "But here's the thing," Drake continued. "We're not an empire. We never were. Empires fall. They get too big, too comfortable, too sure of themselves. We're just humans. We're stubborn. We're stupid. We don't know when to quit." "That is not logical." "No," Drake agreed. "It's not." He cut the transmission. "Time," he asked. Lieutenant Ross checked her console. "Dr. Ellis says 20 minutes, maybe less." Drake nodded. 20 minutes. That was all they needed to hold Dot down in the science bay. Dr. Ellis was covered in sweat. His hands flew over the controls of a machine that shouldn't exist. The calculations were insane. The risk was total. But humans had always been good at desperate gambles. "Will it work?" his assistant asked. Ellis didn't look up. "Probably not. But that's never stopped us before." The station shook. The collective was done talking. Their ships moved closer. Weapons charged. They would board the station, take the survivors by force, and add humanity to their collection of absorbed species. They didn't understand. Every species they had conquered had been smart enough to surrender, smart enough to see the logic of survival, even as slaves, smart enough to know when they were beaten. But humans had crawled out of caves on a death world. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended them. They had looked at the stars and decided to climb there, even though space tried to kill them with every breath. Smart had nothing to do with it. On the bridge, Drake watched the enemy ships approach. His hand hovered over the intercom button. "All hands," he said quietly. "This is the commander. They're coming. You know what to do." Around the station, in every corridor and chamber, humans stopped what they were doing. Engineers at their stations, soldiers at their posts, civilians huddled in the refugee sections. They all heard the same message. "We didn't come this far to give up now." The intercom clicked. Drake looked at Ross. "How long?" 5 minutes. The first collective ship fired. The station's shields flared and died. Hull plating melted under the beam. Alarms screamed. Turner cursed and rerouted power. The lights dimmed further. "We're losing atmosphere on Deck 7. Seal it." Drake ordered. Another hit, then another. The station was being torn apart, piece by piece. Drake's console lit up. A message from Ellis. Just 2 words. "Ready now." Commander Drake took a breath. Outside, 100 enemy ships surrounded them. Behind him, the last 50,000 humans in the universe waited to see if they would survive the next 5 minutes. He pressed the button. "Now." *, the turning point. Star screamed. Dr. Ellis had done something no species had attempted in 10,000 years. He had turned a dying star into a weapon. The science was simple in theory. The execution was madness. But humans had always been good at madness. The station's last functional array fired a beam into the star's core. It was not a powerful beam. It was precise. It touched the unstable heart of the dying giant and pushed it just enough. The star convulsed. Brace, Drake shouted. The wave hit them first. Radiation and heat and gravity distortions that bent space itself. The station's shields were already dead. The hull groaned under the pressure. Metal buckled. Viewports cracked. 3 sections, explosive decompressed before emergency bulkheads, slammed shut. But the wave didn't stop with them. It rolled outward like a tsunami of fire. The collective ships tried to retreat. They were too close, too confident, too certain that the humans were already beaten. The first ship simply came apart. The wave tore through its shields like paper and melted the hull into slag. The second ship managed to activate its emergency jump drive. It vanished into hyperspace and would never be seen again. Scattered across dimensions. The third ship, fourth ship, fifth ship, Paul, gone in seconds. The collective fleet that had hunted humanity across the galaxy for 2 years was burning. Ships exploded. Crews died. The ones far enough away to survive the initial blast turned and ran on the bridge. Drake gripped his chair as the station shook. Status, hull integrity at 15%. Turner shouted over the alarms. We're venting atmosphere from 12 sections. Main power is gone. Life support, backup systems only. We have maybe 6 hours. Lieutenant Ross looked up from her console, and despite everything, she was smiling. Sir, the enemy fleet is retreating. We counted 80 ships. Only 23 are still functional. They're jumping out of the system. Drake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Around the bridge, his crew stared at the screens in disbelief. They had survived. Get me Dr. Ellis, Drake said. The scientist appeared on the screen. His face was burned on one side, and blood dripped from his nose. Behind him, his lab was destroyed, but he was grinning like a madman. We did it, Ellis said. We actually did it. At what cost? Drake asked. Ellis's smile faded. The star is collapsing faster now. We have maybe 3 days before it goes supernova. And the station. Commander, we need to evacuate, now. Drake nodded slowly. He had known this was a one-way trip. They all had. How many ships do we have left? Ross checked her console. 12 cargo haulers, 6 fighters, 2 damaged cruisers. It's not enough for everyone. The bridge went quiet. 50,000 people, maybe 20 ships, and half of those barely functional. Children first, Drake said. Then anyone under 30. Load the ships to maximum capacity, Sir. Ross began. That's an order. Lieutenant. In the refugee sections, people heard the announcement. They knew what it meant. There would be a lottery. Some would live, most would die when the star exploded. But something strange happened. Old Turner was the first. He walked to the loading bay where the ships were being prepared and took off his engineering badge. Give my spot to young Mason, he said. He's got a kid. Asterisk. A woman named Betty did the same. Then a man called Roberts. Then more. Dozens. Hundreds. People who qualified for evacuation voluntarily gave up their spots. We lived our lives, Turner told the soldier managing the lottery. Let the young ones have a future. Drake heard about it an hour later. He stood at the window of his ready room and watched the loading process. People were saying goodbye. Families were being torn apart. Children cried. Parents tried to be brave. This was humanity, not the weapons or the technology or the desperate plans. This, the sacrifice. The stubborn refusal to let their species end, even if individuals had to die. Sir, we're picking up something on long-range sensors. Ross's voice came through the intercom. Drake returned to the bridge. What is it? Ships. A lot of ships. They're not collective. The screen showed a fleet approaching. Drake's hand moved to the weapons console before he remembered they had no weapons left. The ships came closer. They were mismatched. Different designs, different species. Drake recognized the Vellner cruiser, a cross-destroyer, a Thalian science vessel. They're hailing us, Ross said, her voice filled with wonder. A face appeared on the screen. It was a Vellner, one of the species the collective had absorbed 20 years ago, but his eyes were clear. His voice was his own. Commander Drake, the Vellner said, my name is Captain Venn. We heard what you did. We heard that humans refused to surrender. We heard that you fought back. You're free. Drake asked, We broke free from the collective's control 3 days ago. Others have done the same. When the collective's fleet was destroyed here, it weakened their network. We saw an opportunity. We took it. Another screen opened. A cross-female, then a Thullian, then others, representatives of a dozen species. You showed us something we had forgotten, Captain Venn continued, that empires fall, but life endures. You fought when there was no hope. You refused to accept the logical answer. You reminded us what it means to choose freedom over survival. We need your help, Drake said simply. There was no point in pride now. We know, Venn replied. We brought supplies, medical equipment, engineers. We will help evacuate your people. All of them. Drake felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Hope? Why? He asked. Captain Venn was quiet for a moment. Because every empire in this galaxy has fallen. The Velner Empire, the Cross Dynasty, the Tholian Federation, all gone, absorbed or destroyed. But you humans, you're not an empire. You're survivors, and maybe that's what the galaxy needs now. Not empires, just people who refuse to die. The rescue ships docked with the dying station. Humans and aliens worked side by side to evacuate everyone. The children went first, then the elderly, then everyone else. Ship by ship, the station emptied. Commander Drake was the last to leave. He stood on the empty bridge and looked at the dying star one final time. We're not done yet, he said to the darkness. Then he walked to the airlock and left the station behind. 3 days later, the star exploded. The station was vaporized instantly. But by then, humanity was gone, scattered across a dozen ships, heading for a dozen different destinations. The collective would hunt them, that was certain, but now they wouldn't be alone. We endorsed 6 months after the station's destruction. Humanity had become a ghost. They had no homeworld, no central government, no grand fleet. The 50,000 survivors were scattered across hidden bases in dead systems and forgotten corners of the galaxy. They moved constantly. They never stayed in one place long enough for the collective to find them. But they were not hiding. They were preparing. Commander Drake stood in what passed for a command center now. It was a hollowed-out asteroid in a system with no name. Around him, representatives from 15 species gathered. The Velt, the Cross, the Tholians, others who had broken free from the collective's control. The collective is adapting, Captain Venn reported. They've strengthened their network. Breaking free is harder now. They're hunting us systematically. How long do we have? Drake asked. Months, maybe weeks. They know we're organizing. They'll come for us soon. A cross warrior named Tor slammed his fist on the table. Then we run again. We've survived this long by staying mobile. No, Drake said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. We stop running, Drake continued. We end this. End it how? Tor demanded. The collective has thousands of ships, millions of drones. We have what? A few hundred ships, a handful of fighters. Drake pulled up a star map. It showed the galaxy with red markers indicating collective-controlled space. There were hundreds of markers. They covered nearly 80% of known space. The collective is strong because they're connected, Drake said. One mind controlling everything. Perfect coordination. No confusion. No doubt. That's why they always win, Venn agreed. It's also their weakness, Dr. Ellis said. He stepped forward, looking older than his 50 years. I've been studying the collective's network for months. It's beautiful, elegant, and completely vulnerable. He highlighted a point on the map, a single system deep in collective space. This is the central hub, the core intelligence that coordinates everything. Destroy this, and the entire network collapses. Every absorbed species regains their free will. Every ship loses coordination. The collective dies. It's impossible to reach, Tor said. That system has more defenses than any target in the galaxy. For a fleet, yes, Ellis agreed, but not for a single ship. The room went silent. You want to send one ship into the most heavily defended system in the galaxy? Venn asked slowly. A small ship, Ellis clarified. Fast, undetectable, carrying a weapon that doesn't look like a weapon. Drake understood immediately. A virus. Ellis nodded. Not a computer virus. A logic virus. Something that exploits the collective's greatest strength, their perfect unity. If every mind thinks exactly alike, then one corrupted thought spreads to all of them instantly. And who would fly this suicide mission? Tor asked. I will, Lieutenant Ross said. She had been quiet until now. I'm the best pilot we have, and I'm small enough that I don't need much life support. More room for the weapon. Drake started to protest, but Ross cut him off. Sir, you taught me that humans don't quit. We don't run from the impossible. We fly straight at it and dare it to stop us. Drake looked at the young woman who had served under him for 3 years. She had been just a junior officer when the war started. Now she was volunteering to die so humanity could survive. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't, Ellis said gently. The weapon needs to be delivered directly into the hub's core systems. It requires a pilot, and it requires someone who won't turn back. The room fell silent again. Finally, Drake nodded. Well, he asked. 2 weeks, Ellis said. That's how long it will take to prepare the ship and the weapon. 2 weeks later, Lieutenant Ross stood beside a ship that barely qualified as a ship. It was a converted cargo shuttle, stripped of everything except engines, life support for one person, and stealth systems that Dr. Ellis had built from salvaged parts. Commander Drake came to see her off. You don't have to do this, he said. Ross smiled. Yes, I do. Someone has to. Might as well be me. You'll be remembered, Drake said. When this is over, when humanity rebuilds, they'll tell stories about what you did today. I don't need stories, Ross replied. I just need the collective to fall. She climbed into the ship. Drake stepped back. Around them, hundreds of people had gathered to watch. Humans and aliens together. Species that had been enemies for centuries, now standing side by side. The ship launched silently into the dark. For 17 days, Ross flew through collective space. She used old smuggling routes that Captain Venn had provided. She hid in the shadows of dead planets. She drifted past patrol fleets with her systems powered down to nothing. The collective never saw her. On the 18th day, she reached the hub system. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. Thousands of ships moved in perfect formation. Stations the size of moons orbited the central hub structure, so massive it looked like a metal planet. Ross took a breath and started her final approach. The defenses were exactly as thick as Ellis had predicted. Automated weapons, sensor nets, patrol drones, but they were looking for threats, not a single damaged shuttle limping toward the hub like debris. Ross slipped through the outer defenses, then the middle defenses, then the inner ring. She was 300 meters from the hub when they finally noticed her. Alarms screamed, ships turned, weapons charged. Ross didn't hesitate. She fired the shuttle's engines at full power and crashed directly into the hub's core access port. Metal tore, shields failed, the shuttle punched through the hull and buried itself deep in the hub's central systems. Ross was bleeding. The crash had broken her ribs, and probably worse, but her hands still worked. She activated Ellis's weapon. It was not a bomb. It was a question. The virus spread through the collective's network at the speed of thought. It asked every connected mind a simple question. Why do you serve? For most species, the answer was immediate. Logic, survival, the greater good. But the question had a flaw built into it. The more minds tried to answer it, the more they began to question. And questioning was the opposite of unity. The collective's network began to fracture. On a collective battleship near the outer rim, a Velner soldier suddenly blinked. His mind was his own again. He looked at his hands in wonder. On a station in occupied space, a Tholian scientist stopped working and started crying. She was free. Across the galaxy, millions of absorbed minds broke loose. The collective's perfect unity shattered like glass. In the asteroid base, Drake watched the sensors in disbelief. Collective ships are going dark, Venn reported. Hundreds of them. They're just ... stopping. It worked, Ellis whispered. It actually worked. Drake closed his eyes. Ross had done it. She had flown into certain death and saved them all. The war did not end that day. The collective's ships still existed. Their weapons still fired, but without coordination, they were just scattered remnants. Over the following months, freed species turned on their former masters. The collective's empire crumbled system by system. Humanity helped where they could. They shared supplies. They offered shelter. They taught others what they had learned, that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about refusing to give up. A year after Ross's sacrifice, Commander Drake stood on the surface of a planet humans had never seen before. It was green and blue and beautiful. The locals called it New Haven. We're offering it to you, Captain Venn said. Your people need a home. This world is unclaimed. It's yours if you want it. Drake looked at the sky. Somewhere up there, Ross's ship still drifted in the ruins of the collective hub. A monument to human stubbornness. We'll take it, Drake said. But not just for humans, for anyone who needs a home, for anyone who refuses to give up. Vin nodded. The Velner Empire lasted 10,000 years. The Cross Dynasty lasted 15,000 years. How long do you think humanity will last? Drake smiled. We're not an empire. We don't measure ourselves in years of glory. We measure ourselves in days survived. And we're very good at surviving. Around them, ships were landing. Human ships, Velner ships, cross ships. A dozen species working together to build something new. Not an empire, just a community of survivors who had learned the same lesson, that empires fall, power fades, glory ends. But life endures. Humanity had proven that. They had lost everything, their world, their empire, their future, but they had refused to die. They had fought when there was no hope. They had sacrificed when there was no chance of victory. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten, that the strong do not always survive. The smart do not always win, but the stubborn, those who refuse to quit no matter how bad things get, they endure. Every empire had fallen. The Veltner, the Cross, the Thalians, the collective. But humanity was still here, and they always would be. Asterisk.